Hello and welcome to today's webinar on how to develop a reporting framework for ESG disclosure regulation. My name is Sarah Underwood. I'm an editor here at 18 Group and I'll be moderating the webinar. Our expert speakers today are Michelle Auger, CFA, former Sustainability Strategy Director at Wells Fargo, Adrian Whelan, Senior Vice President and Head of Regulatory Intelligence for Investor Services at Brown Brothers Harriman, and Alex Marola, Executive Director, Software Solutions Commercial Strategy for Sustainability and Private Markets at S&P Global Intelligence. I'll ask the speakers to introduce themselves in just a minute, but first, a few hints and tips for you if you're watching the webinar. To the right of the video, you'll see a box, the Slido box for questions and polls. We'll be running 3 polls today. I'll let you know when they're coming up, and do please take part. It's always interesting to find out where you are on your journey towards ESG. And then in the other area of the panel, you can put your questions there for the speakers. Please put your questions there whenever you like, and we'll gather them up and answer as many as we can. So put your questions there, and please do vote as the polls come up. So that's enough of me, and let me come to our speakers and ask them to introduce themselves. First, Michelle, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your interest here.
Oh, hello. Thank you very much for having me, Sarah. So my name is Michelle Auger. I've been working in sustainable finance for the past decade and a half, quite a long time now. And I've been most recently working at Wells Fargo as the Sustainability Strategy Director.
Okay, lovely. Adrian.
Hello all. Yeah, I'm Adrian Whelan. I am Global Head of Market Intelligence for Brown Brothers Harriman. A large component of that is actually tracking bank and asset management regulation. Obviously, ESG is wider than just regulation, but it's been a huge drive for sustainability and ESG policymaking. I sit also on our Global Sustainability Council, which basically charts the course that Brown Brothers take on our sustainability journey. So lovely to be here today.
Thank you very much indeed. And Alex.
No, thank you so much, Sarah, and it's a pleasure to join Michelle and Adrian today. So my name is Alex Marola. I'm responsible for ESG across all of our software solutions platforms. So been with S&P for over 10 years at this point, really been focused on the sustainability space for about the past 3 years, and really been working closely across both public and private investments to really help our clients really scale up with these new data challenges. I'm just excited to dig in today with everyone.
Excellent, some real expertise in the room today, so I'm looking forward to this. But let's start with an audience poll. As I said, you'll see it on your screen, and the question is, what is the state of ESG reporting at your organization? So while you answer the question, let me come back to Adrian to set the scene and explain how he sees the state of play on ESG reporting.
Yeah, so the state of play, one of my favorite catchphrases is ESG is everywhere. And by that, I mean, regardless of the nature of your product, geographic location, regardless of your function actually in financial services, whatever role you're in, ESG sustainability is going to hit onto your desk in some way, shape or form. Or if it hasn't, you should be asking around. I think the state of play on reporting is interesting because I think it's a political hot potato at the moment out in general society. For the first time in a long time, we're actually seeing a lot of pushback and we call it negativity around ESG. But when you look at what we're here to talk about today, ESG reporting, that's indicative of using science and data and facts. That's not a belief system. That's not woke capitalism. That's not a politically motivated. This is using data. And this is what regulatory and ESG sustainability reporting of various kinds is looking to do. It's looking to go to a fact-based system of risk management, of allocation of capital based on data and hard reporting, rather than, as I said, some subjective belief system. But it is tricky at the moment. The other thing I will say, again, briefly, is fragmentation is real. Again, ESG is everywhere. It's driven by policymakers and regulators, but it looks a little bit different depending on where you're located. So starting in the EU was probably at the vanguard and drove it, but most regulators, UK is doing its own set of regulatory reporting requirements. Some people think, say, China and the US are not on the ESG journey. They certainly are. SEC is making rulemaking. Actually, at state level, only yesterday, California came out with Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions reporting. So it really, really is everywhere, and it looks a little bit different. And I'll end by saying there are some global standards, and we might talk about this a little bit more later, that are actually coalescing around the same things. TCFD, for example, the ISSB is based on. So it's continuously evolving, but it is improving. And while the dust cloud is still up in the air, you can hear a lot of negativity and it's too fragmented. But I think it's starting to coalesce around more uniformity, and we'll talk about that as well, uniform data sets. I think the regulation has pushed more data availability rather than less, and that journey will continue. So when you step back and look in holistically, it's challenging. There's new skills and data that have to come out to be reported upon, but it's actually improving, and the fragmentation is actually reducing. So I think that we are all on a journey. People on this webinar will be on different stages of their journey, but just to know that ESG definitely is everywhere. You're obviously interested if you're at this webinar, but we're at the start really of a journey that is fast evolving and continuously evolving.
Okay, thank you. Alex, what do you see when you're out there in the market?
And Adrian too, kind of echo some of the points you made. I think, you hit on some of the key themes there, which one is that it's everywhere. It's a baseline requirement for an organization to operate on today. Certainly I'm based in New York, there's a bit of the politicalization around ESG and this perception that, there's this, concept of woke capitalism, but I think the reality always comes down to the same thing for me. It's about really understanding what these companies that you're working with are doing. And to me, it really comes down to that key fact. It's putting, a tangible set of metrics, facts, science-based, data to actually, drive better outcomes. I think what this has really done is a great job to kind of level set across the industry. I spent a lot of my career in the private markets. Data can be very varied about, we'll say, its maturity and its accessibility. Now spending a lot more time with our asset management clients, where data accessibility isn't the challenge, it's more making that data actionable. I think this is really driving a lot of great conversations, not only with regulators, but also with investors, trying to understand what is the true goals you have around putting capital to work. How do you drive, sustainable outcomes? Doing something once is easy, making it repeatable, and to do it again, to me, that's the real challenge that people are trying to address. And I think while there certainly have been early adopters within the space who have been looking at sustainability-based investments and green investments for years, if we look at this holistically, it's still we're in the early, phase of that adoption curve. A lot of folks have done their initial disclosures for SFDR this year, or in the States here in the private side, EDCI, they've gone through that first initial disclosure cycle. Some folks are still just trying to figure out what their baseline needs to be. And I think that, goes back to the point you highlighted, Adrian. It's a journey right now, and we're not going to solve all the problems, today or out of the gate, but you need that consistent focus on, what are your goals? What are your investors' goals? What are the goals of the companies that you're working with? And that, to me, is really how you can look at this holistically and start to, define how you want to, create frameworks, how you want to drive this reporting, but also how you want to make this data more actionable and drive better impacts and returns for your clients today.
Okay, that's great. Could we see the poll results, please? And I think we're going to see quite an interesting representation of what you've just said, Alex and Adrian. Adrian, would you like to comment on that? Does that seem real well to you, or are more people not getting on as fast as you might expect?
I love the confidence of the excellent. I'm good to see there, but actually it does show what we've just said. Okay, and we're not saying we're right or anything, but people are at different stages of their journey. So some people might feel more comfortable in their position than others. Some might be starting out, and again, it depends, and it depends on your asset classes, your geographies, your investor types. So it's not homogenous. There aren't homogenous firms in our industry, and the impact of this regulatory fragmentation and reporting fragmentation depends on your business. So it's not unusual to see a kind of disparate responses. But I'll go back to the excellent. I don't think we'd be as candid or as bullish to suggest that our own situation on reporting is excellent. But it is improving. And I think, again, trending is important. And I will go back to, there's more positivity in the market on a practical basis than there was this time last year, for example, because the data availability, data standardization, and the actual awareness and broad understanding of what's required is actually increasing day on day.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. And coming back to you, Alex, what problems does this sort of state of play cause for financial institutions trying to build business in the ESG space?
I appreciate the question. I think, Adrian, you highlighted some key things I was going to touch on there when we look at that, how people assess themselves, so the first piece, that it's going to vary heavily. There's still a certain subjective manner to, looking at ESG and sustainability, and I think it's fantastic that folks think they're, ahead of the curve and have a great process in place, but, I'd say most of the folks, fall into that okay bucket, from the organizations that I work with. And that's fine, that's great. And I think having that honest assessment, gives you a baseline to grow and evolve from. I think one of the challenges, while data accessibility has become a lot more robust, and there's different ways that you can acquire this data and different providers, we feel a leader in that space. There's still not, we'll say, pure consistency. It's not like looking at a credit rating, where everyone has agreed to, this is the baseline and here's how we're going to base the whole business on. So I think that really puts a lot of the onus on those data consumers. If you're an investment firm and you have a net zero target and you're aligned to the Paris Accords, great, that's your marching orders. If you have other firms looking for, we'll say, more green opportunities, it's going to be a different approach to how you look at that data, how you design a framework, how you build products around it. I think it really comes down to the point you highlighted earlier, Adrian. We think about the science aspect, looking at big data, finding these additional opportunities. To me, it's more of a research exercise, and in order to, build a good foundation for that, you need good, consistent data. And I still think there's a lot of, evolutions within that. Some folks are looking at data self-reported from companies, other folks are leveraging estimates. I think the data continues to mature, and that's only going to be better for, the different products that can be built off of it. But I also don't think you can, we'll say, bet the farm on one approach today. It needs to be bespoke to not only the investors we're working with, but the companies we're working with too. And I think that's a key piece that, ESG sometimes get missed around. It's really about the nuance, and it's around the details, and like anything, the devil's in the details, and that's also the opportunity. So I think that's, a lot of the challenge that the organizations we're working with is there's just so much information out there. There's so many different ways that you can block and tackle this. A big part of this is education. And I'm not just talking about education for, our peers, but also for the companies, for CEOs. Why is this relevant? Is this going to be more of a burden? I don't think it is at all. It's a benefit. It's being able to tell a holistic story about yourself as a company, yourself as an investor, or an asset manager, and what you see, the impact that you can drive around that. And I think that's really the nut that we're all trying to crack here, is that, at the end of the day, a lot of this is around how do we prevent greenwashing? How do we have a level playing field? And that, we'll say, lack of clarity today, is a lot of the big opportunities we have, to educate people on these opportunities and how we can be more successful.
Okay, Adrian, will you add to that?
Of course I will. I even as I was preparing for this, I think, I don't like the word problem, but I don't want to keep talking about fragmentation, but there's lots of different versions. And Alex just talked about the devil's in the details. So if you look at all the acronyms in the space, and I'll just name like SFDR, CSRD, GRESB, ISSB, Greenhouse Standards, TCFD. There's lots of, some of them are voluntary, some of them are mandatory. Then you get clients want a version, of what their values are. I think the devil is in the detail. Dealing with that, there's a vernacular, there's a language around sustainability that people are trying to learn. So the EU taxonomy, for example, tries to get at that. It tries to get a defined weighing and measuring system. Again, it's proliferating kind of on the globe. There's new skill sets that are coming in. It is big data. It is climate science. It is actually communication and storytelling as well. It's all of those things. So what started almost as a compliance, and the word greenwashing came up, and that's one of the big pitfalls apparently, and it was seen as compliance and legal risk. It's actually, again, ESG is everywhere. It has to be, it's unavoidable. So it should be an integrated part of your business strategy. And then we go to data. You can have a centralized stack of data, which you might need to slice and dice depending on which framework and voluntary or mandatory standard you need to report against. And I think that's why people should be kind to themselves. Nobody except the person who said they were is perfect on this topic, because it's fast evolving. There's data scarcity in some areas. So we're all on a journey. Some people are on a different, and we need to be kind to ourselves as an industry. I think the trade press are unhelpful, both in the over politicization of the topic, and they continuously talk about greenwashing or, slippage. There's more good than bad happening. Some of the things that are happening is because of the ill-defined rule sets, which are constantly evolving. If you look at the vanguard of it is the SFDR, that's going back to the drawing board, because pragmatically people said maybe there was parts of that we can make better. That's what we all need to understand, that greenwashing risk and reputation risk is real. But once you're making an earnest, scientific-led, data-led effort to integrate sustainability into your business, it's going to be hard, and have a direct conversation with your client on that. It's hard to be pinned with greenwashing.
Okay, thank you. Let's dig a little bit deeper into the challenges that people are facing. And another poll question for you, our audience, and it is, what are the challenges of ESG disclosure at your organization? As you can see, there are a number of choices, but please feel free to tick as many boxes as are appropriate to you. And while you do that, let me come back to Alex to talk about regulations that require ESG disclosure and the sort of challenges they raise.
I think, to me, and Adrian, I love the way you assessed it, highlighted, SFDR is, kind of the foundational, cornerstone that a lot of these are built off of. And if you can play that further back, TCFD, and the UNPRI, as, predecessors to that, again, it's always striving for, a similar goal. Like, what is the baseline to have a conversation around? And I think when we think about the disclosures, they're, on one aspect, from a regulatory perspective, a lot of them is still best effort, and I think that's great initially to give everyone that opportunity. We'll say to have those training wheels on to understand, what policies need in place, how to educate these companies on how to best report, how best to get this data from third parties, and verify and validate that it is the most accurate. Again, the difference of looking at attribute data versus, calculated data like ratings, and so to me, it comes down to, again, what is the, the organizational goals? And I think a lot of what we talk about is, around carbon and emissions, and that's certainly, I think we'll say that the largest perception is that's what, ESG is. It's around carbon monitoring. But I also think that, sometimes falls a little bit short. And in the States here, we see more on the social front, and even on the governance front, and to me, that comes down, what are the type of opportunities we're looking for? I think the governance area is a very interesting part, because it comes down to how do you operate an organization? How mature is this company? How is it best set up to, acquire more capital? How is it best set up to succeed? And if you're looking at that, as your primary driver, you still need to, we'll say, check the regulatory box from a carbon disclosure perspective, but your focus is more on the governance of these companies. Similarly, we see, folks who are looking at this more from a DEI and social perspective of ensuring they have, a completely diversified, employee and client base and how the opportunities that generates. And I think the key piece is to, not look at this as a one size fits all or a box that you need to check. This is a journey that you're going through, and understanding what your goals are, what the organization's goals are, what those companies' goals are really going to help you, ensure that you have that right foundation in place. From a regulatory disclosure perspective, to me, what that all, brings us forward to, is that concept that, that's just part of the process. This is not the end goal of saying, great, I filed my SFDR, disclosure forms in June and I'm good until next year. It's a constant journey, folks are looking at this data, more, robust cadences, we're not quite seeing this as, monthly reporting, but, quarterly assessments, check-ins with these organizations, you're important. So when you come up to that year in reporting, or you go into next year's cycles, or now you're part of the CSRD disclosures and there's even more data requirements, you're not starting from, scratch. And I think that's really key to, being prepared for these regulatory disclosures, and also looking at that long-term belt, like, why are they there? I think that's the key piece, is not, not making this a box checking exercise, but understanding holistically what the goals around this are. Adrian, I think, do you have a comment?
I do. So one of the things, like, we didn't just pull this out of this thin air. Regulation is following very obvious investor demand and appetite, particularly large institutional investors who started looking at things such as stranded assets, for example. That started then filtering and seeping into banking and asset management as important. Because it became scalable, because it became a larger component of the market, regulators then said, oh, hang on, we need to put a rule set over that. So this is not new and there's rules built and now we're jumping to comply. Actually, it's in reverse. A lot of, again, people are on different levels of the journey, but ESG and sustainability considerations and risk management is not new. It is new because, again, this political mushroom cloud of debate, which is actually just a maturation process. And that's why we're dealing with regulatory reporting now, because there's already, and there is actually now that general populations are more aware of sustainable investing, particularly younger demographics are more interested rather than less. But I have to say that in terms of processes to deliver sustainable investments, that's quite mature. What we're talking about here is standardization, harmonization of how you actually build data and report data. So that's what's new. I just wanted to say, like, again, that gets misunderstood a little bit, that regulators are forcing ESG sustainability. It's quite the reverse.
Michelle, coming to you on that as a practitioner, where would you say the challenges are as the regulations roll in?
Thank you. I've been so encouraged listening to both Adrian and Alex, because I love the optimism that's coming from the both of you. Actually, from my perspective, I would say that although it might seem that it's not new, I think there's a lot of pieces of legislation which is new for a lot of companies who have not previously reported. And this will be the first time. And I think if we take a step back, we have to remember, in the EU at least, that this proliferation of legislation, these requirements to disclose, are really coming out of the EU's obligations to meet their Paris Agreement obligations, their commitments for climate goals, for net zero. So I think there have been a lot of acronyms that we've just heard in the last few minutes. I think the three major pieces for our audience that come to mind are really important. We've already talked about the SFDR. Then we want to talk about the taxonomy and also the CSRD. These three pieces together need to kind of align and form a whole. Any company that is operating in the EU, you really need to think about it. And I think if we think about challenges, it's because, that the most important thing to understand is because legislation keeps moving and evolving. So the challenge is to keep up. We've been talking about the SFDR. It's actually coming out for review now. The Commission has sent out a targeted and public consultation for what's working and what's not working by the SFDR. And what that means is that how we have been disclosing in the past may well change in the future. Second, with the taxonomy, it's not a once and done. We've got at least, I think, 4 delegated acts that have come out. So the eligible activity space continues to proliferate. There's some controversy, obviously, as to whether nuclear and gas are actually eligible as taxonomy activities. So that's something to consider. I think the greatest challenge we're going to see for corporates is the CSRD, because the European Sustainability Reporting Standards are something entirely new. They're actually much more wide-ranging than the ISSB, which Adrian has alluded to, because it's not just climate, it's also the environmental, anti-pollution, circular economy, we've got the social bits and governance. And to top it all off, we've got the auditing requirements, which means you can't just say what you like. You're going to be audited. It's at the same standard as financial reporting standards. And I think to close off the challenge, like I said, because it's evolving, particularly for banks, there's the EU banking package. So we've got CRR3, CRD6, which specifically puts transition planning under the explicit purview of regulators. So banks can't just say, oh, we've got a plan. The regulators are going to look at your plan. And if they don't like it, there will be sanctions. So quite a few challenges there.
Okay.
That's the positivity bubble was burst there, but rightly so. And you actually, so I'm speaking from a bank and asset manager point of view. It's probably less of a change. I agree. From an actual issuer or a corporate under CSDR, you've a lot more things to weigh and measure yourself, as well as run your ordinary business. But you will be judged again from your financiers, or if you're doing a corporate issuance. If you do, this is table stakes, you need to do this, or else you're going to lose access to financing. The other great point that Michelle made was audit and assurance. The auditors by nature have to change their skill sets. They either need to upskill or reskill or retool or get new people, because we've looked at balance sheets and P&L, and that's how companies in finance were judged. Now you're judged on a whole lot broader spectrum of non-financial and materiality. You get into double materiality. These are complex, again, scientifically led weighing and measuring systems. That's going to require actually a retooling of our entire mindset, number one, and skill set across a range of industries and businesses. So I'd be still excited, but it's a huge challenge.
Okay, let's see the poll results and see how our delegates are doing in terms of their challenges. Michelle, haha. I think you said that indeed. Michelle, would you like to comment on these results? They are obviously rather static compared to the things you've been talking about, but what do you think?
gracious. It seems as if everybody read my mind. 67%, that is not insignificant. I'm glad a lot of people out there feel exactly the same way as me. I think that the second one actually does jump out at me about the poor data quality, because I want to hark back a little bit to what Adrian and Alex talked about. This is not a subjective belief system. It's about data and hard facts. The only small fly in the ointment is that there's a lot of this data that we need to report has not traditionally been reported. So that's why we talk about poor data quality and timeliness, because we have to put in place new structures, new processes to find the sort of data and to make sure the data is actually of high enough quality to report. And that kind of, as I go down the chain, that's the reason, again, because you talk about unstructured data. When I talk to data and technology teams, that is a huge challenge for them. It's not just price. It's not just about your turnover. This is data that's from an ESG perspective, like waste management, board, diversity gap. That sort of thing is very difficult to put into neat buckets. So I do agree with the audience, the way they have been thinking about it, again, complex data management, because how do you integrate new ESG data into your existing databases? That's a huge challenge. I mean, really, I can't say enough that on this sort of journey, your data and technology teams are your key business partners. The last bit about non-standard ESG frameworks, I have every sympathy. I have headaches myself because everybody would like to have one global baseline, but currently we've got the ISSB, we've got the ASUS from CSRD. We also obviously have the GRI reporting framework. If you put into the mix the CDP disclosure, TCFD, and now obviously the TNFD, I just think that there aren't enough hours in the day to handle all these frameworks.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you, Michelle. And staying with you, you're obviously very familiar with the challenges. How would you and have you been approaching the challenges to try and make it all a bit easier?
Right. If we're thinking about, all this kind of alphabet soup and so much going on, we've been talking about evolving legislation. When I think about a baseline best practice approach, I would say, first step is identify your exposure. Rather than panic, identify exposure. Look, you will have to look at the kind of entity you are. So where are you based? Where are you domiciled? What's your size? What type of activities that you operate? If you're a multinational corporate, like the kind of companies I have worked for, you may find that you have to then make decisions about your reporting processes because one size does not fit all. And it's particularly tricky if, for example, your parent company is domiciled in a non-EU country because the EU has the most complex and advanced set of legislations. And so I think in terms of, again, best practice, one thing I would like to say to the audience as they listen to us speak today is there's going to be a huge amount of resource and investment to be needed in terms of cost, financial capital, human capital. So don't leave it to chance. It has to be a decision made by leadership as to what kind of results are you looking for? Are you just going to disclose? Or are you going to, as Adrian and Alex said, are you going to look at your business model and strategy? Maybe use the disclosure regime to demonstrate what's your transition path, align with the EU's climate goals since you're operating in the EU. And if leadership is able to articulate the intentionality and the level of ambition, it really helps with then the implementation team to understand what's expected of them. It avoids misunderstanding, miscommunication, wasted effort and frustration. I think that's, baseline. That's how you should at least start your journey.
Okay, Adrian, where will you go from that?
Yeah, so I'll repeat, ESG is everywhere. So it should be a strategic priority of your business. It should include everyone. So I found it interesting. Once ESG started to explode, particularly regulation, a lot of firms you start to see on LinkedIn and otherwise, oh, I'm glad to be the new head of ESG for this firm, or I'm a regulatory expert with ESG competencies. They became very in demand. That's a very tactical way to come at this alphabet soup. If you try and take down each acronym one by one, that doesn't work. What you really need to do is end to end and geographically to Michelle's point, what do we do? What are the customers, the areas and the products that we serve? And is everybody on this ESG journey? Is everyone conversant in what we're doing from the firm strategy? Do they understand as a firm the program of activity that we have to be more sustainable? Do they understand our products, the ones that are more maybe aligned and sustainable, and the ones maybe less so? Do they understand that asset classes, for example, don't all have the same data available, and there's a data asymmetry there, and that's okay. The ones that I've seen fall into problems have taken this tactically. So even from a data perspective, I've tried to do SFDR and then turned around because an investor wanted TCFD and we had to recalibrate the system. What you need is a core set of data and a core set of competencies dispersed across your organization that can deal with the totality of what's at hand. Using the SFDR and the taxonomy, I suppose that's the highest bar. And if you can deal with that, you can deal with anything subsidiary, really. And people need to be looking at that holistically. I'm using consultancy type words now, but holistically and strategically, rather than trying to piecemeal deal with the acronyms as they come. Sorry, okay. One last thing. The upskilling and resource point is important. We used to be an industry full of, again, accountancy competencies and legal competencies. Now there's a lot of data scientists, climate scientists, sociologists, and again, communication skills, hugely important to be able to explain this very complicated subject matter to people who aren't as close to it. So I think how you articulate your story becomes important. If you don't have an ESG story, that becomes your story out into the market, and you will lose customers.
Okay.
Sarah, can I just
question this next one? Sorry, yes.
Oh, I just wanted to kind of add one quick thing here, just to echo something that Michelle and Adrian were highlighting. I think you really touched on a lot of the key points there. And to me, I always boil it down to, it's education and partnership. A lot of this process is, teaching folks why we're doing this, what are the goals, what are our investors saying, but also the science aspect of you have, so many more, experts coming into the space, looking at big data, looking at better ways to get accessibility to this information. And to me, that partnership with data and technology teams, it's a continued evolution. This can't be done in a silo. You can't just have one person responsible for it. That's, you're setting yourself up to fail, but looking at that holistically, teaching people about the whys behind it, and, bringing those experts, getting the information they need, is really, I think, where the success and the scale comes. Sorry, I just wanted to, chime in there.
That's great. I think you're all in agreement, and a very good place for people anyway to start or on their journey to reinforce what they're doing. Excellent, thank you. Quick one here, naming no names. Adrian, what types of solutions are available in the market that can help you, if there are any indeed? No names, please.
No, there are lots of solutions. So again, there's been a proliferation of appetite for ESG data. So there's lots of firms out in the market. S&P being a large, broadly diversified, and then you've got more specialists. One area of interest that I will speak to is actually ratings. So ESG ratings are under extreme scrutiny at the moment. So if you're utilizing ratings from a particular vendor at the moment, regulators are starting to look at those ratings because they're very much relied upon. They can't blindly be relied upon. And then there's inconsistencies between how various ESG rating providers grade or mark the same investments. So that's actually an area, and I won't go into too much detail, but that's an area that's coming under huge review. And one of the why that's important is one of the polls was what's the challenges, inconsistent, unstructured data. One of the things that regulation is looking to do is to harmonize and allow comparability, allow interoperability again of data sets. So actually, this goes back to my positivity. We're going through some short-term regulatory pain, which will actually be long-term gain in terms of standardization. Now, that standardization will do two things. It'll allow people to bring more standardized products that you compare and contrast to markets and solutions. There's a bit of a hodgepodge of different quality and scale provisions in the market. What I would say, there's an absence of data, which is natural, which again, regulation may fix. And then there's some solutions in the market that cover a small corner of the market. So what we're seeing is a bigger, broader, diversified solution is normally what's required, because I go back to my catchphrase, ESG is everywhere. So you're probably going to need one of the larger providers with large data sets and competencies to assist you in what you need to do.
Okay. Michelle, what would you say there? What's the solutions have you found helpful?
Well, here I am very optimistic, oddly enough. Just as Adrian has said, there's been a proliferation of products, not just the client appetite, because we've got this new opportunity, this opportunity because of, again, the legislation led. We've got not just the traditional data providers, we've got new data providers who are coming up with, I think, a lot of innovative offerings. And I'm glad Adrian's already dealt with the ESG ratings issue. But what I'm really liking is the way people are coming up with ways to provide the PAI data, provide new tools for more robust climate risk scenario modeling. And what I'm looking at particularly right now with the TNFD is new ways to source biodiversity data. This is a new area. It's very exciting. And, it really does depend on whether it's terrestrial or marine life systems. And the better the offering, the better for us, because then we have more reliable data methods, technologies to be able to report meaningful data. The only caveat is because there's so much out there, I would say whatever you choose, make sure you've done your due diligence to make sure that the data is fit for purpose. Because again, it goes back to the auditing issue.
I'm just going to butt in once more. Actually, our industry, financial services broadly, have been screaming and looking for a use for AI and machine learning, right? This is a big data challenge, unstructured data, non-financial information. As I said, it could be all kinds of everything. I think ESG solutions, I keep doing inverted commas, they're going to need machine learning and AI to extract the required data from wherever and structure it properly. And I think this could be the biggest and best use case. So I think there's huge opportunity for firms of all various shapes and sizes to use AI and machine learning. And as I said, I haven't been convinced or compelled to see that AI machine learning is really needed in our industry on the static financial data set that we all have. It's not really, we're all trying to talk it up. I think the ESG sustainability journey and the data hungry nature of sustainability disclosures is perfect. Now, I'm not clever enough to bring anything to market on AI and machine learning, but I'm sure someone here might have a solution. I think that's going to be really what moves the needle in terms of normalization of data for sustainability.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up 2 questions for Alex because both Michelle and Adrian have touched on AI. What step-by-step process would you take to build a framework? And touching on what Adrian's been saying, what technologies, Alex, do you think are going to be particularly useful here?
To kind of echo the points that Michelle and Adrian were highlighting here, I think there's, a few different parts of the equation that one has to go through. So first is, we'll say, we're all drinking out of a fire hose, a bit from this process here. There is, so many data sets, so many providers, so many new providers, that have come into the market that there's really this, excess of, data that's available. So to me, first is really putting together just a robust, framework about, what are the priorities internally? What are your definitions of impact? What are the ways that you want to measure that? And really starting with just that, foundation to define, okay, what is important to us? Because it varies so heavily. I think, that's really, step one, after you're looking at, that baseline of your definition, it's okay, what is the information that can be available? How many different sources are we going to look at? How many different ways we want to compare underlying attribute data? To me, that's, working with different third-party providers. Obviously we, have a lot of, success with our clients about addressing that with our solutions, but it's also, no client is using one provider today. It's very much, a broad approach, using multiple different sources to bring together this data and really master it to your existing taxonomies. And I think that's a major challenge where, you may have been doing this from, marking your books on a daily basis or, tying out, your exposure, for, compliance and reporting. And now all of a sudden you're looking at some of these legacy systems and saying, okay, great. How do I integrate in this new sustainability data sets? How do I look at this now holistically? How do I roll this up to my funds and my portfolios? It's a major challenge because there's just so much information about bringing that all together. You need, matching technologies. I think, AI and machine learning are going to hold a key bit of success in this in the future. As Adrian, highlighted there, I think that's, definitely a great area of opportunity of expansion. But then there's also, we'll say, self-sourcing of information, that you can't go to one place to get all this. You can't even get all this information from, all the different providers that are out there. You're also going to have to source data yourself. I think that's very important because that's an area that can sometimes be missed, that there's a lot of insight internally within organizations, whether they've been issuing green bonds and you can capture the underlying detail there, whether you've been looking at, an Article 8 or 9 investment and you put together your own custom, definitions of what that, focus is going to be, that it's not just turning on a data feed, matching to your system and spitting out a report, that there needs to be this holistic approach to ensure you have as complete a data set as possible, and then also not becoming complacent. I think that's the key part. We've talked about the evolutions of the regulations. To me, that's a great thing. If we just, pushed it out there, launched our ESG boat into the ocean and never looked at it again, we would be doing this a disservice. And so, while regulators, I think, are trying to, keep pace with the industry, that we also have this, requirement on ourselves to ensure that, we're preparing for the future. Things are going to evolve and change. Priorities are going to evolve and change. Even if we look at the Paris Accord, alignment, ensuring the temperature doesn't rise X%. It's not when we get there we're done. There's still a longer journey that needs to be done. It's never we can never really sleep on the process here. So to me, just to kind of recap that, it's ensuring you have your own goals defined. It's sourcing as much of that data that's available. And then ensuring you have ways to fill in the gaps around what additional insight you need, and then making sure you're making that data actionable just beyond the regulatory reporting. There's narrative that needs to be done. There's education that needs to be done in partnership again. To ensure that you're bringing all the right teams in here and that this isn't happening in a silo. That's the way I think about managing these different regulatory frameworks.
Okay, that's great. Let's take a few audience questions now. And Michelle, I'm going to ask the first one to you, as it's something obviously close to your heart from what you said. It says, what should FIs be looking for when considering ESG reporting frameworks in the market?
Gosh, what should FIs be looking for when looking at ESG framework providers, you said?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, well, oddly enough, I have been looking at a lot of providers that purport to be able to help with the reporting process. I think what's been key for me is when you're looking for a good business partner, the providers for that sort of platform, they should be capable of integrating that sustainability framework reporting with your existing financial reporting. That's really important. And that they should also be able to have demonstrate great mastery of the ASERs, the CSRD taxonomy frameworks, because otherwise they may be advising you or building the framework platform for you in a way that actually doesn't work. So again, going back to due diligence.
Okay, thank you. One for you there, Alex. Is it possible to future-proof a reporting framework? And if so, how? We've obviously talked about evolving regulation, more and more data coming in. How can you future-proof your platform?
So I don't think you can 100% future-proof anything, but I think it's the, if we bring this back to some of the earlier points we were highlighting around, how we approach the challenges today, and it's having that open mind, and that partnership mentality that, it's not just one person or one team coming in and saying, okay, great, this is the new mandate, when I say jump, you ask how high, you need to have this, a holistic process, to really make sure that you're continuing to meet the evolving challenges we have here. I think for one, again, it always comes back to me of like understanding what the underlying, investments are, and understanding the relationships we have there, depending on where we sit within, the investment space. There may be very robust relationships. You may be just a credit investor and you simply get, a memo every quarter, but I think it's really important to, ensure you have the right connections into those different organizations so you can look at, how they're operating, what are the governance policies they're putting in place, how can you scale to ensure that, while they may be, just learning. Sorry, actually, I'm muting myself there. That they're prepared, for that evolution, and they need that baseline, but they need to continue to reassess. Did we calculate our emissions correctly? Can we evolve how we're looking at that? Are we taking additional action? I thought it was fascinating. One of my clients hosted a seminar for a lot of their technology firms looking at data center, exposure. And the energy cost behind it, looking at chip configurations, Oracle versus AWS, versus Azure, and how that architecture can actually have, higher power impacts and higher costs associated with that, and there's different opportunities to assess there, and to me, that just goes to that partnership and education aspect, that it's not just, give me your emissions, give me your wastewater, give us a head count, do you have an ESG policy? Do you have a bribery policy? I've checked the box and moved on. It's partnering and educating them about, what the goals are today, but also saying, okay, great, now let's look at this, what are the future goals that we can align to here? And how do we best measure toward that? Because I always think it comes back to the tangible aspect. You need to make things measurable and actionable. And if you're not doing that, it's just checking a box, and I think that's really some of the ways and the procedures that one can put in place to ensure that you're future-proofing this process as much as possible.
Okay. And Adrian, one for you here. It asks, should firms build or buy ESG reporting frameworks? I guess it depends a bit on your firm, but what would your broad recommendations be?
Unfortunately, the answer is depends, right? If you're going from 0 to, I don't think you're going to be able to build, right? So it's a build by or outsource discussion. And it depends, again, how central ESG, depends on your asset classes. But I think there's a lot of good third-party products out in the market. Michelle said due diligence 3 times today. That's really important. Picking the right one that can cover all the asset classes, that you can take that data and it doesn't sit to the side. It's integrated into your core. And if we can take, I'm not jumping ahead, but if you can take one thing away from reporting and data, ESG data today, it's just needs to be aggregated with all your other data. It's not to the side. Yes, you're going to have to extract it for specific reporting, but this should be integrated into all your processes to make, again, your investment process and your reporting process better. It's not a weird thing over here. It's an everybody thing here. It's core to our business.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for your questions to our audience and for your answers to our speakers. We do have a few more. I will share them with you, Alex, after the webinar as the sponsor of the webinar. But thank you so much for your questions. There's obviously a lot to talk about still. But coming back to my questions and coming first to you, Adrian, what are the regulatory benefits of a framework for ESG disclosure and the penalties of getting it wrong? Perhaps we should focus here on the penalties, as we've talked quite a lot about what you need to be doing.
Well, I'll briefly touch on the benefits, and we already have. So the regulation will bring harmonization, standardization of data that's available. Then that data should make the investment process better. It should be able to identify positive attribution that sustainable metrics can bring, which evolves it from negative screening, for example. That will be a good conversation to have with a larger cohort of investors. So I think ESG regulation is more positive than negative. It's meeting an investor demand. The downside is the downside of getting it wrong. This is where the trade press in particular are obsessed at the moment, and regulators have picked up that theme and looking at greenwashing. What greenwashing really is egregious overpromising and under-delivering. You can't just say you're ESG. You can't put a marketing campaign or high conviction when you literally have no science-based data to back that up. Now, the amount of instances of that in our industry is quite low, actually. There has been some overpromising, under-delivering, but generally people are trying their best, okay? And I think that the downside risk is real, and I'm not going to try and gloss over that and be overly positive. But once you are using data, you have a policy or procedures in place, you are trying your best where there's data scarcity that's noted. It's very hard to be pinned with greenwashing. So I think there is a huge challenge ahead to comply and to get this data scarcity issue, populated with real usable and, as Alex called, actionable data. But I think we are getting there. I think it's unfortunate that the discourse is more around political ramifications of sustainability and of, again, low instances but high profile events of greenwashing, which people are obviously trade press like to talk about. But I think overall, when we look at banking and asset management on a global basis, I think most people are on the same journey and can see that this is where we're going and it'll make it actually better. Different people are on different stages of the journey. So I think there are, like anything, challenges and opportunities, pros and cons to sustainable integration.
Okay, Michelle, what would you add there?
Yes, I'm going to start with the penalties and then, go with the positive, right? So first, penalties, just as Adrian said, it's the misrepresenting, the greenwashing risk is very real. On the other hand, it's actually not that difficult to fix because a lot of the time when the regulator is looking at you, it's a question of, if you say you have an ESG policy, but you don't actually have one, or if you say there are processes, but then your analysts aren't actually following the processes, there is no auditable track record. So these are things that are, if you put in place good governance, good conduct, controls, it should be easy to get it right, rather than, get an undeserved fine. In terms of the positives, in addition to the market-wide benefits, I would also want to talk about company-specific benefits. Let's say one example is lots of companies have gone out to market now saying they have a net zero pledge. How are they actually going to do it? So, funnily enough, on the CSRD, there is actually a requirement to talk about your climate transition plan. So why not use the disclosure requirements as an opportunity to really look at your business model and strategy, but how are you really going to get to net zero? And use the frameworks, for example, that the ACEs have come up with to try and guide your pathway. Use the taxonomy, thinking about which of the activities have been identified already as being eligible. Think about allocating your capital there. So there are benefits to the reporting disclosure requirements, onerous as they might look.
Sorry, just on regulatory risk, really quickly, I think there's a far larger risk of your customers and investors divesting and not using you than a regulator giving you a fine. So I think regulatory risk is real, but if you don't have an strong ESG proposition for your investors, they're gone.
Convincing, absolutely. You have to look like you have conviction.
But not even looking like it might be enough, Michelle. Okay, let's run a final audience poll, and this stretches into the business and operational benefits your organization is gaining or expects to gain from implementing a successful ESG reporting framework, and why you vote for that. Michelle, you touched on the reg side. Are the business and operational benefits to be had here?
Actually, yes, but then here's, I started off being very, 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 very pessimistic in the beginning, and I've convinced myself to be positive. But because the thing is, as I was just touching on earlier about the way that you can use the disclosure requirements, look at how you could potentially make yourself fit for purpose for a low carbon economy in the future. It is a really good time to look at, what are your conduct measures? What are your control measures? What kind of products do you think your clients are going to want in the future, given the direction of travel? That's the kind of the positives that are coming out from the legislative, if you like, incentives. So, you could think about basically making sure your business is, you can't ever be future proofed, but you can try to be future fit. Lower your costs, streamline, make sure you've got a clear business strategy for the future, and then use the disclosure requirements to demonstrate and show off your story, your narrative.
Okay, thank you. Let's see the poll results, and Alex, perhaps you'd like to comment on the poll results as you talk again about business operational benefits, so we can put those together. So some business benefits, significant business benefits. Okay, Alex, does that seem right to you? And how do you see the business and operational benefits of getting this right?
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think the poll echoes, what we all certainly, you strongly believe in the panel here, is that this is, a fundamental positive, for the industry and for our clients. And I think this, Adrian, I think you summed it up perfectly. While the regulators may, be upset, there may be some fines, the real risk to me is around managing your investor base and your clients that you're working with. I had a client, a large credit investor that I was working with earlier this year, basically, had highlighted that they were doing a roadshow in Europe, and that if you weren't focused on either an Article 8 or Article 9, investments, that they weren't going to take a meeting with you. This is the table stake. This is a base requirement. So to me, if you don't have a policy, procedures in place, you're going to be missing out on major opportunities and major reallocations. And really, as we've seen the asset class grow, both in the public and private side, it really grown exponentially over the past, 5 or 10 years. That there's continued, competition, and you need to differentiate. And to me, this is a great way to highlight that differentiation. It's not just who has the best financial model, but who has the best holistic vision on, what is going to be their impact today, why are you going to be around for the next, 5, 10, 100 years, and if you don't have those processes in place, you're not going to be successful as an organization. And to me, it's not even ESG, it's just looking at, yourself as a firm and how you're going to operate. ESG is part of the process here, but there is so much, of a benefit, not only for, the short term, but that long term. If you don't have a plan in place, you're going to be missing out on this opportunity, and you're going to lose to competitors. The space only grows more competitive, while we're, all about, aligning and making sure we are all, on a similar playing field. Let's be honest, there's still that competitive aspect to the whole, investing in return world that, we need to be aware of and be prepared around. I think that's really what you think about this is great. The regulatory is the very minimal, aspect that you need to do. And that should just be, the cornerstone of a robust foundation that you're going to build as an organization. The returns are there, you're finding better opportunities, you're having better conversations with investors, and you're continuing to drive those relationships, that education and that partnership. And that just drives, to me, better returns and success.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. So ending on a positive note, my final question to all our speakers is what advice would you give to practitioners who are working on ESG reporting? And Adrian, perhaps you'd like to start here.
I suppose I'd go back to get everyone on the bus. Again, if your obligation is regulatory reporting, everybody in your business, though, should be helping and guiding this. It should be part of the strategic priorities. Another thing I would say, if you're worried about your status where you are, trust me, everyone's on different, it's best efforts basis. Everyone's on a journey. So people, like go back, need to be kind to themselves. Ring the bell if you're not getting the support, because again, this is not regulation's the lowest bar. I think this is an investor-led journey that we're all on. The expectation set is coming from the investors as much as the regulators. And the other thing I would say broadly is that new skill sets are going to need to be applied here. I think this is a new way of thinking for a lot of businesses, our own included, and we're going to have to add, and we are adding different skill sets. I overall think there's big challenges in where we're headed, but there's huge opportunity. And I think actually the sustainability of asset management and banking, this is what's going to make it real for people and our customers and grow our customer base. So I think I'd be hugely bullish while recognizing the challenges.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, what would you advise?
Yeah, so in a way, I'll be echoing Adrian. I think the first thing I would say is, your mindset is key. Don't think of the disclosure requirements as something scary. Think of it as an opportunity. Second, be inclusive. If you try to solve the problems yourself, it'll be very lonely. So bring the stakeholders along with you. As Adrian says, get everyone on the bus. Third, I would say, it's not just the legislation that keeps changing. It'll change because society's needs change, and there'll be layers and layers of issues. We started, for example, with climate change, and then now we've got biodiversity. Next, we're going to have the social taxonomy. So my final piece of advice is be comfortable with change. And once you feel comfortable, you go with the flow, things will get a little bit less scary. It can be managed.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And Alex, some final words from you here.
No, first, it's been a pleasure. Sarah, I appreciate the opportunity today. And Michelle and Adrian, it's been a pleasure, hearing your insight. When I think about, what would I boil down to kind of the three main goals? It's very similar to what Michelle and Adrian highlighted. To me, it's you need to start today. And that it's okay that, if you haven't done anything, if you're new to the space, it's constantly evolving, but you need to get, moving in that process. I also think the key thing to understand is, Adrian, be kind to yourself. You don't need to solve all your problems on day one. But you need to start that process and that journey, looking at what data you need, looking at how you can use technology and systems, and partnering with, data experts, data scientists, your technology team to ensure that this data becomes accessible. You can't build a silo in this. You're just going to have to start again if that's the approach you're taking. I think, Michelle, you hit it perfectly as well to sum it up. Don't be afraid to evolve. Things are going to have to change. Things are going to continue to progress. Regulations are going to change. Investor focuses are going to change. And I think that, being comfortable in that discomfort, is really a key part of the process here. I think that's holistically how I look at it, is that, we're in a journey here. we're really striving for that long-term excellence, building a sustainable and a renewable future, but at the same point, we don't have all the answers today, and that's okay. As long as you're comfortable in that journey and that continued reassessment, you need to continue to push forward and make progress, but be okay to admit mistakes, and as long as you're addressing them, I think people are very much open to that journey and partnering with you on that process, and are excited to be educated. People want to learn more about, what the goals, what the initiatives, what the focuses are here, and I think that's really how we can drive, this type of change across our clients and our customers today.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Alex, and thank you to all our speakers for sharing their expertise and experience with us today. A really great conversation, so thank you. Thank you too to S&P Global Market Intelligence for sponsoring today's webinar. Okay, just before we close, a few 18 group events that may be of interest to you. We'll be hosting our RegTech Summit New York on 16th of November, so please sign up soon to secure your place. That one's getting busy. Looking at webinars, we'll be talking about proactive RegTech approaches to fighting financial crime on the 17th of October, and the potential and pitfalls of large language models and generative AI apps on the 7th of November. Don't worry, we'll be doing plenty more in ESG as we've closed this year and certainly into next year. So that said, that's it for today. So thank you again to Michelle, Adrian, and Alex, and thank you to all of you who've taken part in the webinar. Please complete our feedback form, as we're always keen to hear your views and improve our products. Meantime, thanks again and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.